Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Larison, and today I've got a fantastic guest. This is a woman who's well known in our community. Once upon a time, she was known as one of the best athletes to come through Ponchatoula High School and Southeastern Louisiana University. And then she went on to great things, working for the Tulane football program and doing much more. And now she's pretty much the premier social media education expert in all the land. She comes from a big, popular family, and you probably already know that I'm, of course, talking about Kati Morse LeBreton. Kati, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was such a very nice introduction.
Well, you make it easy because you've accomplished a lot of things in a short life, and I'm eager to hear about them in more detail. Of course, our families go way back. Your grandmother and my father worked together for many years at the sheriff's office. Your grandfather was a very well-respected and popular constable. And anyway, I grew up with your Uncle Chance. I grew up hearing your dad talk about your playing career, when you were a softballer, fireballer. So anyway, I'm excited to meet you in person a little and get to know you a little better. And why don't we kick things off with our viewers with you just telling them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I am from Ponchatoula. I'm a Ponchatoula native, born and raised here, went to Ponchatoula High School, graduated in 2009. My maiden name is Morse. And like you mentioned, my family has been in Tangipahoa Parish for many, many years. My grandmother, Carol, worked for the sheriff's office, and so did my Pa Rich, or Richard Morse. And my dad, Kelly, worked at Homestead Bank here in Ponchatoula for many years. And my mom is a third grade teacher at Champ Cooper School. She's been there over 30 years. So I don't think you could get more Ponchatoula than me. But I think I'm one of those folks that I'm the perfect example of when when you want to come home. I was a collegiate athlete. I was a scholarship softball student athlete at Southeastern Louisiana University. I have both my bachelor's and master's degrees from Southeastern. And as soon as I graduated with my master's, I moved to New Orleans, and I was working in broadcast journalism in the college athletics sphere. My first job was at the Sun Belt Conference in New Orleans, which is where I met Willie Fritz, who at the time I did not know would soon become the head coach of Tulane football. And I interviewed him many, many times when he was the head coach at Georgia Southern, which was in the Sun Belt Conference at the time. And I was his third hire when he was brought on as head football coach at Tulane. And so I spent 5 amazing years working on that coaching staff as the assistant director of operations and the social media director. So that's really where I got my start professionally. But then, of course, this crazy thing called COVID happened. And that's really one of the first things that brought me back home. I knew I wanted to be closer to my family and get back to the community that I grew up in and all my friends and family. So I moved back in 2021, and I've bounced around from working in downtown Hammond with their Main Street program to being in the Alumni Association at Southeastern as interim director there. And now I'm the director of Power at Fidelity Bank, which is the business development program for women-owned businesses, which is a perfect fit for me as a business owner myself, teaching social media education. So I love what I do. I love where I live. I married a New Orleans boy who went to Jesuit high school and went to Louisiana Tech and played baseball there. And he's living in Ponchatoula now. So I converted a New Orleans boy to the North Shore, and he loves it. Loves the grass.
Sounds like you're a great recruiter. I love to hear that. You're bringing some top flight talent to town.
Oh yeah, I have extensive experience in recruiting for sure.
That's great. Well, let me backtrack that was a very good description of your life to now. But I want to go back to kind of the beginning and unpack a little bit of the bundle about your family.
Sure.
Because I'm tickled to see you now doing what you're an expert at, social media education, but you've kind of brought back this circle to working in a bank. And of course, your dad was a very prominent and well-known banker. Everybody remembers seeing him and Brian Stipe making the rounds.
Oh yeah.
You know, a lot of people here don't know that where my brother is now chief of police, once upon a time, that office was your dad's office. It was a bank, Ponchatoula Homestead. But let's talk about your family because, you know, you mentioned several of the key members in there, but your family was so well known. You know, think back, and your mom, excuse me, your grandmother will always be someone I smile when I think of because she was kind of a prop in essentially every political speech my dad ever gave. It was pretty well known when he took over in 1980. The department was virtually bankrupt and they didn't have a radio. The old sheriff had stripped the radio wires out the wall to sell for scrap or whatever. And so Dad used to joke that Miss Carol Kay, who, as you know, had a booming voice, was his radio for his first year in office. And so I can think back to all these rallies we would attend, and we heard that joke 13 times a campaign, and Miss Carol Kay was there smiling and playing along. And but anyway, what was it like being their granddaughter, Kelly Morse's daughter? Just tell us a little bit about the Morse family and share that with our viewers, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that she is loud because she would absolutely be like, yes, I am. And she would get even louder and agree with you. That's where
loud and proud.
I see a lot of myself in her a lot. She was not afraid to speak her mind. She was very funny, even when she really wasn't trying to be. But I'm very close with my family, like you mentioned, and my dad and I grew up. We had that connection where playing softball, I was very close with my dad. We were always on the road together. We were always going to pitching lessons, going to practice. And so that's something that was instilled in me at a young age, was that work ethic, but also the importance of family. And I really struggled with that early on in my career, meaning that when you work, especially in sports broadcasting or in collegiate athletics, there's this weird myth of the badge of honor of moving away from home, where you kind of have to move away from home and never see your family if you want to be successful. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to not put God in a box, and I'm going to believe that I can do what I love to do, but still be able to see my family on the weekends. And I really was blessed with those opportunities, first with the Sun Belt and then with Tulane, where I was luckily only an hour or so away in New Orleans. And that was great because I'm learning that as I get older, the jobs change, and it seems like that's what you want to do. That's what you aspire to. But at the end of the day, you always really want to come back home. I think about my grandma and my grandpa all the time. They both are no longer with us. But their services, their funeral services were the most people I've ever seen at funerals. And I spoke at both of them and equally laughed and cried at their services because they truly were two of the funniest people.
For sure.
They truly deserved their own television show, just with how they interacted with each other and the stories that they told. And I think I have that quality of that storytelling ability. You'll notice everyone in the yes, everyone in the Morse family, from my Uncle Todd, who's my dad's oldest brother, to my dad, who's the middle son, and then my Uncle Chance, who everyone thinks I'm Chance's child because of my red hair, but I'm Kelly's. But we all have kind of that gift of gab. Even my younger brother, Caleb, he's an insurance salesman. And so
you can only make it in that gig if you do have that gift. You can't.
Exactly. So it's, my family is just a really big part of my life. And I was also lucky enough to marry into a family that is also very close. And my husband's very close with his family. And we are blessed to have, I've even, I don't want to say I did it myself, but my in-laws now live in Mandeville. They've even moved to the North Shore. So that's very important to us, is that aspect of family and being able to be around people when we want. I'm meeting my dad at Street Side Market at 6:00 when we're done here. So
I love it. Well, we mentioned this off air when we were chatting, but I've seen, I love your family my whole life, grew up with them in the sheriff's office, and from your Uncle Todd, who's kind of the big brother, to your Uncle Chance. Good story. Ask him about the time he rubbed creosote in his eyes at my dad's farm. He and Stormy Dean Joner. I watched him cry trying to get that out, dunking his eyes in the Chapapilla Creek. But once upon a time, I went on a road trip with some buddies to watch an Auburn LSU game at Auburn, and your
Yep.
dad, who was there with his dear buddy Philip Bankson, was there, and Philip was our driver. And I remember how eager he was to get on the road to get back to you in softball. And it was the only one of these away games where we literally left the game, late at night on the plains of Auburn and drove straight back to Ponchatoula, so that come Sunday morning, I guess you had some travel ball team or something. But he was not. Kelly Morse was not going to miss that one day of softball with his girl that he was so proud of. So it's neat to see your family be so tight. I really appreciate that. Having said that, when you have a close-knit family like that and they're very involved, and as I understand it, your dad even coached you in high school softball. Is that right?
That's correct.
What's it like when you leave the nest? Because you went somewhere close. I love the Tulane to Ponchatoula connection like you. That's where I went to school, and I loved being just an hour away from mom and dad and my own tight-knit family. But what was it like professionally breaking into an area where really Ponchatoula, everybody knows a Morse. There's a Morse in every direction, and suddenly you're at Tulane, and it's really different. You're in a big city at a national university. How did that go for you?
There was definitely an adjustment. I always make this joke that when I was first kind of introduced into that culture of New Orleans, and especially when I first started dating my husband at the time, he grew up in New Orleans, attended, Jesuit, and I always make the joke that when you're in New Orleans and people that live there ask you what school you went to, they don't mean college.
Right. And that's the first question they typically ask is,
correct.
Where'd you go to high school? Where'd you go to school?
And so when I would first meet people in New Orleans, they'd say, where'd you go to school? And in my mind, I think Southeastern. And so I say, oh, Southeastern. And like, oh, no, high school. And I'm like, oh, Ponchatoula. And they're like, what?
Right. That's a question you never got around here, at least in the old days, because we're kind of a one school town.
Right. So it was a big culture shock for me with that. Now, of course, I loved it. This was, pre-COVID New Orleans. There was always something to do. I met so many people, and I have so many friends that I met there to this day. But there was also, with that athletics factor that I mentioned before, a lot of people that work in college athletics are transplants. Very rarely do you have someone on a staff that is from or lives in the city that they're working in. And so that was really special for me because my family was able to come to a lot of these games and a lot of these events. And so the folks on the team really kind of adopted my family as their own.
Yeah, that's really neat.
And that happened also when I played college ball at Southeastern. I was the local girl on the team. And we always made the joke that back then, if my family didn't come to the game, that a third of the stands wouldn't be filled up.
Y'all were like the attendance insurance policy, right?
Yes. And that, Richard Morse, this is one of my favorite memories of him. He would I was a pitcher. And so he would sit directly behind home plate, my grandpa, and he carried a little notebook, and they gave it to me after he passed, but he would record almost every pitch that I threw throughout college. And he would argue with the umpire. He would sometimes argue with my coach. And then every now and then I'd look up and I'd see him trying to give me signals because he would still remember my signals from high school because him and my dad would talk about it. And I would look at him and my dad and they would be doing like this. And after the game, I'd say, you cannot try to give me signals. I can't throw what you're telling me to throw. Yeah. And they're like, well, we know you better and you need to be throwing this.
That's great. That's great.
But during college, my family kind of became the house to hang out on, Thanksgiving break and Easter break when those players that were from out of state didn't have the ability to go home. For 4 years, we had 10 girls at my house for Thanksgiving and Easter. So it was something to adjust to, but to me, that was one of my favorite parts about going to school close to home, but then also being able to be within arm's reach to where I was working as an adult, especially that when I was a young professional, and that was one of the first jobs that I had. that's an adjustment no matter what you do, no matter what industry you're in. And sometimes at the end of the day, you're like, shoot, I just need to call my mom and just like cry, or I need to go home and eat some chicken and dumplings.
Yeah, it's those early days of being a grown up. It's a transitional period in life it's tough on anybody. I want to share, you kind of prompted a fun little comment here from my buddy Andrew Kirsch. Rommel Raiders pride. So that's indicative. Andrew now lives up here with his beautiful family. He married a local athlete like you. And long story short, let me say this, Andrew, I hope my power forward Mason is practicing. I heard he did good at the basketball evaluations the other day, but don't let him take any days off. They're keeping score this year on us.
Yeah. Hydrate.
Hydrate for sure. So folks, if anybody else is watching live and you'd like to comment live like Andrew's done here, know that we have the ability to post your comment during the show. So feel free to put it up there. We're here with Kati Morse LeBreton. We're talking about her background, growing up in Ponchatoula, going to Southeastern, playing ball there, all the friends she made and how well that went. And then early in her career at Tulane, you mentioned you got a master's degree at Southeastern after your playing days were over. Tell us about that. What did you study at Southeastern?
So I got a master's in organizational communication, which I wasn't really planning on attending grad school. This is one of my favorite stories, but I'm a bit of a Disney nerd. I'm one of those weird Disney adults that people talk about. I actually just got back from Disney. But
so wait, before you go any further, favorite Disney princess? Who's your gal?
I don't have a favorite princess. I'm more of a villains person.
Oh, nice. Okay.
My favorite Disney character is Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean, but my favorite anyone is Ursula from The Little Mermaid.
I love it.
But
my boys love the Poor Unfortunate Souls routine.
It's the best villain song. Best villain song in a Disney movie ever. Best one. But when I had a plan that I wanted to go do the Disney college program after I graduated, because being a collegiate athlete, that's one of the only drawbacks of being a collegiate athlete is that you don't have time or the resources to be able to get internships or do study abroad or things like that. So I was dead set on, when I graduated, I was going to do the Disney college program for at least the summer after I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And studying broadcast journalism, I was given the opportunity to apply for a scholarship through the NCAA, the Jim McKay scholarship. And so for anyone that's not familiar, Jim McKay was a very famous sports broadcaster. He covered almost every Olympics. He was one of the most famous sports broadcasters of our time. And they had a $10,000 scholarship to attend graduate school for any NCAA athlete that was pursuing a career in sports journalism. Well, I won. And so I'm like, well, shoot, I guess I got to go to grad school now. Yeah. And it was the best thing I ever did. I loved it. I love being a student. If I could figure out a way that was financially responsible to just go to school the rest of my life, that is what I would do. I don't know what degrees I would get. I would figure it out. But I got a master's degree in org comm from Southeastern, and I was so thankful for that because it gave me the opportunity to get those internships and get that experience that I wasn't able to get as a student athlete in undergrad. And that was also where I realized through those internships that I didn't want to work at a TV station like I thought I wanted to.
Okay. So how did you come to that? Did you go in with I'm going to be the next Robin Roberts?
100%.
And what changed your mind? What led you to believe that was not the career you wanted?
So, there's a lot of, you really have to grind when you're working in TV. And it seems like it's very glamorous, but a lot of times it's not. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of early mornings, late nights. And I interned there and I got tons of experience. But my favorite part of all of the roles that I did as an intern was being on the sidelines at high school football games. And so that's kind of where I realized maybe my passion is not sitting behind an anchor desk. I think I wasn't ready to give up that aspect of sports yet. And
Yeah.
so that's where I realized I want to be on the sidelines of a football field. And
Okay.
so I was blessed enough to get contacts through that internship to apply for a job with the Sun Belt, where that was baptism by fire. I worked there for a full year, and I was a sideline reporter on ESPN for all of their football, men's and women's basketball, and baseball and softball games for a whole year. And when,
And I assume
yeah,
that's how you got to know Coach Willie Fritz. Did you interview him
correct.
on the sideline, or how did that work?
Correct.
Okay.
So he was the coach of Georgia Southern at the time. And I remember it was a game, Georgia Southern versus App State. And I remember going up to App State, and I was so sick from motion sickness, because I don't know if anyone knows, but their field at Appalachian State is literally on top of a mountain. And you have to drive up this mountain to get to the field. And I'm very prone to motion sickness. And so I was so sick, so miserable, but I had to push through. And if anyone knows Willie Fritz or has seen video of him, and I know I can say this lovingly if he hears this, he has a very distinct voice. He sounds like he smokes 5 packs of cigarettes a day, but he does not. And it's like this.
Yeah.
And I remembered interviewing him because of his voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year goes by, and my phone starts ringing, and I answer it, and I hear his voice, and he's like, "Hello, is this Kati Morse?" And I'm like, what is Coach Fritz from Georgia Southern? How did he get my number? What's he calling me for? And he had just been hired at Tulane, and he remembered me from the sidelines, knew I was from Louisiana, and he was coming from, coaching at Georgia Southern, but going into not just Louisiana, but New Orleans, Louisiana. And he knew he wanted someone to kind of help with that transition for his players. So I was brought on as the assistant director of operations. So I helped out with anything and everything. I said I was basically the team mom. And I loved every second of it. It was the best job I ever had. I did it for 5 years. Everywhere they went, I went, was on the planes, at practice, in the rooms with the coaches. I met Pat McAfee. I was mentioned on his podcast one time. That was my best week of work ever.
Yeah, that's big.
He's just as crazy and funny in person. That's not an act.
Wow.
But I loved it. And that was one of the best experiences. And that really, all of those skills that I learned doing that, I feel have prepared me for any other job I've ever had since then. Because I tell myself, if I can help plan a bowl game trip for 200 people, or the meal plans for all of these athletes, and monitor what they do on social media, and do all of the social media marketing and video for this team, I can do anything. And I miss it a lot. It's a lot of work. A lot of people don't realize how much work goes into college athletics, but especially a operation like a Division I football team. It is a well-oiled machine, and there's the good teams. 9 times out of 10, it's, of course, the coaches are good and the players are good, but it's the people behind the scenes that really make that thing tick. Yeah. And it was so much fun. I loved all the players. I loved working for Coach Fritz. I never saw him off. He was literally always the first one there, the last one to leave, and he truly cared about the people that worked for him. I always had present on my desk on my birthday. I always had Christmas gifts. Him and his wife, Miss Susan, they were amazing. So that experience really set me up, I think, for all of the roles I've had since then, and has really influenced a lot of my professional and personal decisions since then.
Well, thank you. As an alumnus of Tulane, as was my dad before me, thank you for making Coach Fritz, get such a soft landing here. Clearly, he loves it. He stayed despite tons of offers last year.
Oh, yeah.
And, Tulane, we're a program that's had a lot of downtimes. When my brother and I were ball boys for Tulane back in the 80s and early 90s, the teams were just terrible. And so we don't take Coach Willie Fritz and the success that he's brought our program for granted. So thank you for the part you played in that. As I understand it, I know folks are dying to hear about the redhead method. So it seems like a good time, because as I understand it, your focus on social media was really born out of your experience in sports. And as you
Yes.
mentioned, managing social media for the team at Tulane. So if you don't mind, tell us about how that came to be. How did you get so involved in social media? And then let's talk Redhead Method once you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of came onto the scene during this perfect storm of when a lot of adults were getting on social media. You know, when I was younger, it was only young people that were on Facebook, and Instagram really wasn't even a thing, and Twitter didn't exist yet. But then when I was just starting out as a professional, I kind of already had this footprint online and felt like I had a pretty good understanding of what it meant to be kind of that social media. I hate the word influencer, but having kind of that footprint on social media and that expertise helped me get that job at Tulane. And part of what I did in my role there was monitor what our student athletes put out on their social medias, because I know you know this with what you do, but you know, especially when you're a scholarship athlete, you cannot put whatever the heck you want on social media and expect not to get in trouble, especially when you represent a university or a high school or, you know, your employer. You can't. And so I realized that 90% of our student athletes, even though I felt they had the best of intentions, had no clue the repercussions of what was going to happen if they kept putting the things that they were putting out online. And so that's where I first got the idea of there was a gap essentially in this education where these student athletes got all of this assistance in so many other areas. I mean, there's nutritionists on staff, there's strength coaches, athletic trainers, tutors, life coaches. They had all of these experts and wonderful people at their disposal. But social media, which was a huge part of their life, and now it's even bigger with the introduction of, you know, NIL into college athletics, that this was kind of being forgotten or not really seen as an important part. And I really give so much credit to Coach Fritz and to athletic director Troy Dannon, who actually just left Tulane and took another athletic director job. But they really allowed me to be creative and kind of let Redhead Method take root within that athletic department. I went to them and I was just like, look, our football players, God bless them, they are so good at football and they're so sweet and I love them, but they're idiots on social media. And they post really stupid stuff and they literally don't understand the consequences that could happen. And so it grew from being in the football locker room and in the meeting rooms to all of the other teams at Tulane. And through that is kind of where I don't know if you've kind of heard the origin story of Redhead Method, but I kind of discovered that I wasn't doing as well as I thought I was on social media. Through these opportunities through Tulane Athletics, you know, I went to Troy Dannon and I said, hey, I want you to pay me more to do this. I want to bring this to all of our student athletes and I want to make this part of their enrichment and our curriculum, so to speak. So he says, well, that sounds like a wonderful idea. There's this software company that's been emailing me and calling me, and they want Tulane Athletics to purchase this software. And it was at the time essentially background checking software, but for social media. Now, again, this was 7 years ago at this point. So this type of software is so much more advanced now. So he, with the best of intentions.
What does it do? Does it scrub your past social media posts and then bring forth anything that might be problematic? How did it work?
Correct. Like, so essentially how it would work is I would download the software and I would type in Parker Larison and it would do its thing and beep and bop and boop. And then it would spit out this report where
that's scary. You got me nervous. I'm about to start sweating. No telling what stupid stuff I put on social before I met a wife who could keep me in line.
But see, it does make you think. Like, it makes you think like,
Absolutely.
oh gosh, what did I put out there? So he, with the best of intentions, says, you see if this software is worth it. If you think it's worth it, put your accounts through and learn how it works. If you think it's worth it, I'll buy it and I'll pay you more. And I'm like, easiest ask ever. so I run my accounts through it,
Right.
and there were things that I had put out on the internet when I was young and dumb and thought nobody was watching. So, before I was a bill paying adult that knew
Right.
better. Um, and I was mortified, and people ask me all the time, what did you put on social media that was so bad? It wasn't something that was earth shattering to where I need to be arrested or you need to look into like my political leanings or something like that. But it was, things that I was very ashamed of as Katie, that I was ashamed that I had put on the internet when I thought nobody was paying attention. It was things that I would not want my parents to see, my husband, most certainly not my boss, right? So I had to go to him with a spreadsheet of essentially all of my discretions and be like, hey, so not only does the software work, but I might not be the right person to teach these kids because apparently I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I was one of those stupid kids. So like, please don't fire me. Right. And he, bless his heart, was like, look, you have 7 days to get your house in order. Long story short, I did not lose my job. I was there for 3 more years. But that was kind of the turning point for me where I realized, okay, if who eldest daughter of, family that's in church every Sunday,
Right.
Straight A student, scholarship athlete, parents were involved. I was taught right from wrong. Even if I could mess up when I was young, anybody can.
For sure. Yeah.
Especially in the landscape of social media where it is still so new and it changes so quickly and so fast that nobody really knows what they're doing.
Right. It's ever changing. And, it makes for a compelling story now, though, because who better to bring that message to anybody that needs to learn it than someone who's walked in their shoes and made their mistakes.
Right.
And you have a path to kind of not only prevention, but somewhat redemption and to avoid that. So that's cool. I mean, I love it. Thank God he didn't fire you. You helped a lot of people, and he could have hired somebody with some squeaky clean pages that didn't get it and couldn't teach it,
Right. And it gives me, I think, a little authenticity and
for sure
value to what I bring because I really believe in it. I joke all the time that I go and I just yell at kids, but when they hear my story, they really kind of sit up and pay attention because they're like, oh, well, if it can happen to her, it can happen to me. And social media is so much more involved now than when I was in high school. When I was in high school, it was literally just Facebook and Twitter. And now there's so many more avenues and so many people are making millions of dollars existing online. So it's not all bad, but we as humans haven't caught up with our behaviors and our habits. And so that's really where Redhead Method has morphed into what it is today. Is it's gone from that reputation management education into how do our devices and social media and how we exist in this online space affect all other aspects of our life as human beings? How does it affect Parker as a professional, as a dad, as a husband? And what do these behaviors say about how you interact with others online? So it's really come from a true place of authenticity, and it's evolved with how social media has evolved.
That's really cool. Let's dig in a little bit. Our producer, Danny Lynn, has been kind enough to post both the link to your website and the link to your Facebook page.
Thank you, Danny Lynn.
But we also have the ability, if I can pull this off, to bring up your actual webpage so people can see what it looks like here. So that's the Redhead Method. So practical skills to positively build a digital reputation. You alluded to the fact that this can be businesses, this can be students. Tell us where you're working in the community to bring the Redhead Method, out into the forefront of the community to protect people, like you said.
So my main audience, so to speak, is going into schools. So I work a lot with students, mainly from 5th to 6th grade, all the way through college. I work with a lot of sports teams, whether that's high school, college, or, club teams. But I also work with businesses and their employees, and I work with political figures and people who know social media is important, but don't really know how it fits into their life. And I will say this, that it's not social media marketing education. A lot of people, when they see the phrase social media education, they think that it's marketing. It is not that. I'm not going to teach you how to get more followers on TikTok. I'm not going to teach you how to do stories on Instagram or edit videos. I did that for a living and I never want to do it again. So
there are plenty of places you can find that,
I can tell you exactly who to go to for those services, and they're professionals and they're wonderful. But this is more, I say it's for any human with the internet. So that is your children, adults, the decision makers, the thought leaders. Where I would like to be in the future, my goal for Redhead Method is for what I teach to be in the curriculum in our schools. And I would love to start it here in Tangipahoa Parish, where I went to school and where I live. Because I am very familiar with the education system. My mom's a 3rd grade teacher at Champ Cooper. And so I'm very familiar with what the curriculums are and what is in, not just in Tangipahoa schools everywhere. What's currently being taught is not enough. And that's no one's fault. It's because the adults that are teaching this don't know, because they didn't grow up with social media. And then, kids have this very blasé, laid back feel to social media where they don't really care what happens because they grew up with it and they have familiarity. So there's really no middle ground. And I think I'm kind of one of those perfect people to be that middle ground and be the person that educates both the young and the old in how to do it right.
Because, you mentioned you came up and it was limited. Talking about these kids who were born into the TikTok, era, but then you got old fogies like your dad and me who, when we were in high school, it was like, what the heck's this internet thing people are talking about? But computer science was like how to write a word processing document. We took typing on old typewriters in the 8th grade. So you're kind of bridging those gaps between generations, because all of us need this education, like you said, whether you own a business like I do, or you're coming up as a student. I'd love to dig in here. I notice here you have kind of laid out the process for how to get on board. So, for example, if somebody with the school system or a business or whatever, anybody that could benefit from this is watching now, if you would walk us through this process of how they can get the Redhead Method, going.
Right. So let's say, typically, like I said, most of the time when I book, I'm a speaker for hire, essentially. And so I speak to big groups of people. I do private sessions with families and stuff, but 9 times out of 10, I'm with a group of people. So that might be a sports team, a school of students, a company with all of their employees. And I have a discovery call and we talk, and what are your needs? What do you think people need to know the most about? Do we need to talk about, we do need to focus on mental health and social media? Do we need to talk about communication and social media? Are there parents in the room? Do we need to talk about how to navigate the digital world as a parent in 2023? There's all of these different subcategories that I can focus on and really tailor it to who I'm working with. For example, if I'm brought in to speak to a group of 6th graders, how and what I discuss with them is going to be wildly different than how I speak to seniors in college or parents or someone who owns a 6-figure business. It's all essentially the same skills, but how I present it varies and is customized differently to who I'm working with. Because like I mentioned before, at the end of the day, these are skills that everyone needs to have, but I can teach you how to apply it all to your life specifically, because we all face a lot of these issues and are going to continue to face them as our world becomes more and more digital every single day.
That's so cool, and it's so necessary. I see it as a business owner, as a parent, as a community member. These are tools we need. And I'm not alone. I see other folks are tuning in here. I want to share with you our dear friend Mandy Franks Braywick. She says hello to you, and you're so amazing, and
thank you, Mandy,
and a huge part of our community.
Thank you.
And she goes on to say that your mom was one of her teachers, and your mom's incredible, and you just get it. You get it honestly from your mom. So Mandy, thanks for sharing that.
Thank
That's really
you.
neat. Mandy was one of my favorite interviews we've done. So, folks, if you're interested in learning more about her, check out the videos part of our page, and you'll see her interview. Denise Dominguez Fletcher's watching, and so she's posted. Hey,
Hi.
Denise, you come into a lot of things we were talking about earlier. We're talking about the great bankers of Ponchatoula earlier. You were certainly on that list, on that Mount Rushmore of Ponchatoula bankers. But you also know a heck of a lot about the softball world.
I love seeing all of these last names, the Dominguez and Fletcher and all of these.
Yeah.
And I make the joke all the time that that's why I had to go find a boy in New Orleans to make sure he wasn't my cousin.
Right.
Because I'm related to everybody here. So.
Well, that's Ponchatoula. I'm going to tell you, if you grew up in Ponchatoula and you want to get out there in the dating world, I'm going to tell you, go see Michelle Haino Sellers, okay, at Strawberry Castle. She has got this town mapped out. There are a lot of traps for the unwary. Sometimes you know that's your cousin. There are a lot of folks you don't know that are your cousin that are in these old Ponchatoula.
I'm also a graduate of Strawberry Castle, Parker.
Oh, so. Oh wow. Well, hey, that's the best. I've been so you can help me recruit. I've been begging Miss Diane to come on the show for
I will
years.
call her.
And yeah, I need some. I don't have that juice. I'm just the dad of some Strawberry Castle kids. We need an actual, alumna like you to do it. But so we have only a few minutes here, and I've kept you longer than I promised. So I thank you for your patience. I know you got to get to your dad in just a few minutes, but I do want to ask you from the perspective of a parent, for tips, because what are the things that we as parents, kids of any ages, but what should we be most careful with, and what lessons do we need to learn up front about responsible social media management?
So I could talk about this for 6 hours, and we don't have 6 hours, but I want to preface this by telling everyone that I do not have kids. So I know sometimes that when someone does not have kids and they have an opinion or they try to impart knowledge on those that do have kids, sometimes it may come across wrong, but think of me as an objective third party that is just imparting some wisdom. If and when I do have kids, I joke all the time, they will just live outside in the barn and play outside. They're not going to get any kind of device. And I know I'll probably eat my words, and they will have iPads and all the same things everybody else does. But for me, what I'm seeing most recently in a lot of the research, especially when it comes to educational trends, and students are different now. Our kids are different now. And there's a lot of factors to that, but technology is a huge factor in that. And what I would encourage any parent, this is for your children of any age, is that technology is an integral part of your child's life. It's not going to go away. COVID taught us that they had to have those Chromebooks, those laptops to go to school when we were in quarantine. Your child, you probably feel, is obsessed with their devices, but there's a reason for that. It's because that's all they've ever known. And for us who are not in that generation, sometimes we don't get that, because I work with a lot of parents, and my parents said this to me as well. I went to school then there wasn't a phone in sight, and I had a great time, and blah, 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 blah. And part of me wishes that that's the time we still lived in, but it's not. And so parents need to understand that it is okay for your children, especially your teenagers and your preteens, to care deeply about that phone, because that's their social currency. That is how they communicate with their peers. But on the flip side, because they use that technology so much, they're losing critical skills like conversational skills, communication skills. So I could give you 1,000 tips, but I'm going to hone in on one. Try as much as you can to map out times in your day with your kids that are device free. That is hard. That is a lot easier said than done, because their brains are chemically wired now to be addicted to screens. But the more you talk to your kids and the more you play with your kids, the better off they will be in the long run, because research is showing that kids are losing their ability to be creative. I heard someone say that kids have lost the ability to be bored because they are constantly entertained by devices. And so I challenge parents to try to map out times in their day to where, as a family, you do something, even if it's for an hour, that is totally device free, that is an activity that you all do together, or even that you do one-on-one, you know, mother son, mother daughter, etc., that you start to help them build those skills, but also give them breaks from those devices. And again, it's a lot easier said than done, and it's hard for adults to put the phones down sometimes.
Right. But I think it's important that we set that example. And I can tell you, just from our house, my wife's very strict on the lack of screens, and
Good.
in concert with you on all that. But I can tell you, you know, when you first say there are no phones at the dinner table, you're not going to get my phone. You won't. They don't have phones in my family yet, but you know, but it's easier in week 2 than it was in week 1, and in year
Yes.
2, it's just how we do dinner at our house, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's great advice, and I appreciate it. Katie, it's time to go see your dad for dinner. I know he misses you. Before we go, is there anything else on your mind, on your heart, anything at all that you'd like to share with our viewers or listeners before we go?
I just want to say thank you for having me on, and I did not expect to talk so much about my family, especially my grandparents, and I really appreciate you sharing all those kind thoughts and those kind words, and that really did my heart good, especially talking about my grandparents, because they were both sets of my grandparents too. My mom was an Adams, so you know that's another huge family in
Oh
Tangipahoa
yeah,
Parish.
absolutely.
From the old Southwood Academy, that's where my parents met,
Oh
and
wow.
so that was just really nice to know that they haven't been forgotten, and that I can live on with their legacy, and that you know, don't move too far away from home. It's not that bad, and having those people around are great. And Ponchatoula really is a fun place to be. We love living here. We're a couple of minutes away from downtown, and it's nice to be in a community kind of like Cheers, where everybody knows your name.
Yeah,
So
right.
I just appreciate you doing what you do and all your kind words that you shared with me. And this was really fun. I had a blast.
Well, I meant them. Your grandparents, you know, played a big part in my life and in my family's life, and they're definitely not forgotten. They were beloved around here, as the funerals you spoke about, you know, were testament to. And I'll say that's part of what this show's about, folks. If you're watching, we want to not only interview the dynamic new next generation in Katie, but I love that this show gives us an opportunity. In some instances, we're interviewing people from that greatest generation, like Mr. Reggie TV, and what a gift it is to have an hour of his life told, you know, here on the screen. But just talking about the good old days and the good people in them is a lot of fun too. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. And to our viewers, thank you for sticking with us to the end. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Y'all
Thank
take
you
care.
so much. Bye.